explain what the ruling actually said and what tariffs it does apply to?
The ruling applies specifically to tariffs that are part of the Liberation Day tariffs that Trump called, or so-called his reciprocal tariffs, which were calculated on a rather crude formula of the amount of trade imbalance that the United States had with a country, and then he would charge those countries a ratio based on that. It's a really unusual way of calculating tariffs, and of course it led to rather exorbitant tariffs being charged against very small countries that sold things to the U.S. but didn't necessarily have money to buy things from the U.S. So these tariffs were also under the IEEPA Act, which gives the president certain powers of imposing emergency tariffs. And of course, those were rationalized along the lines of, Canadian border issues and drugs going to the U.S. and this sort of thing. It does not apply to the tariffs on the auto and steel sector, which were issued under a more narrow authority, under the 232 authority under the U.S. Trade Act. So there are still tariffs that have been applied specifically against Canada in these important sectors in our economy. But we do see that the blanket tariffs have now been ruled illegal. The Trump administration is, of course, claiming that they have the authority to relaunch those tariffs under other authorities within the Trade Act. Right. So we'll see if there's an attempt to relaunch them. That's certainly what the administration is saying now.
Right. And he was saying as well that when it comes to any kind of refunds on the tariffs that have already been paid, he talked about potentially just being in litigation for years.
These particular the particular ruling today that removed these blanket tariffs, they were launched. The suit was launched by a wine seller in New York State, I believe it was, that was objecting to the cost that it would result for their import business. So indeed, Michelle, I think that you'll see litigation from big and medium and small businesses around recovering monies or possibly litigating other tariffs that may be in the pipeline, or even also these other more narrow sectoral 232 tariffs. But of course, I just add very quickly that the 232 tariffs are based on authority that's been given to the president under an act of Congress specifically. So it's possible that we might see some sort of negotiation between members of Congress and the president going forward for applying these narrow sectoral tariffs, again, which could be caught up in court for years.
And so what did you make of the reaction and the response from the president this morning?
I think the U.S. is in a constitutional crisis. I think that this is not a surprise to anybody who's been following U.S. politics for some time. We've seen executive, legislative, and court, parts of the U.S. government asserting authority, having their authority curtailed. The president is, of course, in a unique position to assert their authority, especially in a media-driven age where there isn't a lot of patience for things like deliberation or court rulings. And of course, President Trump is uniquely in a position to do this as a media personality himself prior to becoming president. And of course, we've seen that, multiply many times over since he's become president. So I think that we're going to see more of that in the next little while. And of course, this creates a lot of business uncertainty. So a lot of the uncertainty we've seen with trade realignments in recent months and weeks around European trade, Canadian trade, Asian trade, moving away from the United States. I don't think that this ruling is necessarily going to change that very much, certainly not in the near term. But I think we see American businesses, frankly, panicking over their loss of market share. So this, unfortunately for them, won't, I think, restore consumer confidence in the U.S. market, in investing in the U.S., in the value of the U.S. dollar. We've seen the U.S. dollar lose 10% of its value since Trump became president again in January of 2025. So there are lots of high stakes political and economic issues that remain unresolved. And I imagine the crisis will roll on.
And so, you've touched on this a little bit, but we're looking, of course, at a joint review of the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. What's a lot at stake, as you said, but what could this mean then for that relationship specifically between Canada and the United States?
Well, of course, Canada wants those auto sector and steel industry sector tariffs to go, and those still remain legally in place
Right.
after this ruling. Of course, further retaliatory tariffs become less credible for Trump to use as a threat in future negotiations. And that's really important because the loss of a credible threat certainly changes bargaining positions. So there might be some more leeway for Canada to drive maybe a slightly harder bargain in upcoming negotiations with the United States. And, more broadly, beyond CUSMA, Canada is further incentivized, as is Mexico, for drawing closer together with each other and also with other trade partners, because this doesn't resolve that underlying economic uncertainty. And it adds to it because the main driver of that uncertainty is not U.S. economic fundamentals, but it's U.S. political instability, because, of course, macroeconomic policy in the U.S. is very unstable right now, with confrontations between the president and the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell in recent months. That's been an ongoing crisis, and fights over interest rates and the dollar will continue. So I think that there's going to be that underlying uncertainty, frankly, as long as Trump is in power.